Welcome everybody to Legacy Builders. This is our
Hello.
very first episode. And welcome to the set. This is where we'll be filming all of our videos. I'm Madison and this is my dad, Eric. And yeah, we're really excited to be filming this podcast. Dad, do you want to tell them a little bit about how we got started on this?
Yeah, so to kind of keep it a little brief, I mean, this is literally an evolution of like hundreds of hours of conversation with Madison.
Yeah.
And, we just talking to people, just talking about our story, some of the things that Madison and I talk about. And we just tell people about it. And they're like, man, this is great. We need to know more about it. And little by little, we just got to the point where we're like, we just need to start doing a podcast because the relationship that we have is special. The story that we have in building legacy is special, and more people are interested than we really knew about. And so we thought, well, let's do a podcast, and this just gets people to hear from us, and we get to tell our story. So that's what this is all about.
Yeah, and then to add to that too, it's also been sometimes we're in the midst of like really good conversation and we're like, man, we should be recording this.
Right.
And so it's also to pass down to when I have a family and their family and their kids after that. So we want to pass this down, just the wisdom that you have gained generationally as well.
Yeah, and that was a big key too, is a lot of stuff that I've learned, and I'm nothing special. I've learned things, and my biggest concern kind of is what if my kids don't ever come across or experience situations and information that I experienced? What are some of the important things I want them to learn and pass on to them? What are some of these life lessons, foundational concepts? I know I'm not right about everything, and we don't have everything in order, but I feel like I do have a lot of things right. And those are the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to be open and honest. We're going to talk about the good stuff. We're going to talk about some bad stuff, because that's where people are at and kind of where they're at. I think people generally have a desire to grow more. They generally have a desire to do something more with their life. And that's where I was at. And I was like, I just want to make sure that my kids and their children it can experience and understand some of these philosophies, concepts, principles that I have come across. And I actually started writing a book and started developing a manual for our family.
Yeah.
And we've had how many talks have we had just as a family talk? We have once a year we sit down and we just talk about life, all areas of life.
Well, and that, in all honesty, just started developing a couple years ago. It's been in the process for a while, but I think me and Riley, who's my brother, we're finally to the age where we can really understand this wisdom and continue it and actually do something with it. And so that's why we all sat down as a family and really got started, created an entire legacy book, which we'll be sharing with you guys, and a Made mission statement for our family.
Yeah.
And just all sorts of things, which we'll dive into, which will be exciting.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. Legacy isn't about me telling my children what to believe. It's about us deciding together and coming together as a group and figuring out, okay, this is who we want to be. This is what we want to stand for. And that's been the exciting thing. And not me and my wife pushing things on the kids, but to be like, let's talk about it. Let's talk about life. Let's talk about these other concepts that you're hearing about, and let's decide who do we want to be and who do we want to what do we want to establish as our life missions, like you said. And we'll be sharing that as well. That'll be fun.
And that also comes to on foundation. That doesn't just happen the first time you try. The first time I came to you, I wasn't sharing thoughts with you that I was necessarily having. It was all questions.
Right.
Throughout most of my middle school and high school, I just came and would ask questions. But it was built on a foundation of trust from you and a foundation. Like there's a lot of things that I told you that I didn't want you to share with anybody else.
Right.
Not
And
'cause-
I didn't, because I would have violated that trust and you wouldn't talk
right,
to me anymore.
right. And so these are all things that, I mean, we'll also be getting into in the podcast of what it takes to actually build a relationship and what it takes when the kid has to start building the relationship. But fortunately, that wasn't what I had to do. You set a great foundation for that, but sometimes you do have to do that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so
And we just hope to help as many people as we can. And,
Yeah.
So we're going to cover all kinds of topics. I mean, some of the stuff that we have once a year now, we have a family gets together and we talk about different areas of life and where are we at? Have we made any progress? What do we need to work on? And in the areas of health, in the areas of finances and business, relationships with our husband and wife, relationships with us and the children, with our friends. What other?
I mean, relationships between siblings, relationships between like kid and parent as well. Like, how are we doing there? I know a couple years back, me and my mom set a goal to really work on a relationship, and it's improved a lot. And if she's willing to share some of that eventually, that would be really cool. But that's something, I mean, these are goals that we set on, because relationship goals are something that are often forgotten but are just as important.
Right, and goals is important. Like things just don't happen by themselves, and unless we have a plan and we activate it and if we put thought to it, things just don't naturally happen. We have to make things happen, and that's what Legacy Builders is about. Is there's action, there's activity that has to be intentional in order to to build and to get to the place that you want to be. And I'm a home builder. I build houses, and I just don't go out and just start digging in the dirt and then be like, oh, here's where we're gonna put some footings, and oh, this is where this room is gonna go. No, I mean the house is literally built before we ever dig one hole in the ground. And so we know what we're gonna do. And so and nobody plans to fail. They fail to plan. And even in family, even in relationships. And so many times life gets in the way and you just forget to set time to go out and hang out. And
depending on who, like what their love language is, could be very important to them. I know we've had some conversation, because my love language is quality time, where I'm like, hey, when we don't spend time together, like that hurts. And that's more, we'll get into that as well. This is just supposed to be an introduction, but we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Like, when did you start thinking about legacy and your family? You just talked about we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. So was this something that was in your mind before you even had kids, before you even got married? Like when did that start in your mind?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, just like what we're doing right here, you're going to be exposed and you're going to experience topics that you may never have thought about. And now you're introduced to a concept and you're like, wow, I never thought about that. I think I want to look into that. That sounds like a good idea. And that's what this is about, is to help present good ideas. Well, I didn't come up with this idea by myself. I heard it from somebody else. One of my pastors back in Nebraska he taught about the importance of legacy. And I hope maybe one day to have him come on and help talk about this. But I heard it from somebody else, and I was like, wow, if it wasn't, for him, I don't know. But I've also had a lot of friends. I've had a lot of other people that I've met, business associates that started talking about, key principles and concepts to have in all areas of life. And I'm like, you know what, I want to just start identifying these things, because I know I plan to have a family, and all this happened before I had a family. And I want to make sure that I'm taking good notes and making sure, this is something that I want to make sure that not only I understand and develop, that I want to pass this on to my kids and their kids. And that's kind of what this is also going to be about, like with how Legacy Builders podcast is going to work. Here's what we're going to do. Madison and I are going to have some conversations on topics that we can only share from our perspective and our experiences, and that's what we're going to do. And some of our friends and people that we talk to who are like, yeah, you guys should talk about this, and you guys should, they have questions, and they're like, man, I wish we did this. So those are things we're going to start talking about and present. We'll have some of them on to help share and ask questions, but we're also going to have special guests come on, and I'm going to reach out, and I have reached out to several people that early on in my life and even currently in my life who are continuing to impact me and develop these mindsets and teach on these concepts. We're going to bring them in, and they're going to be our guest speakers. You're going to get to hear from them some of the same things that I heard from, and people who are in process. Legacy starts with a decision.
Yeah.
And there's so many people I'm excited for some of our guest speakers to come up. They literally made a decision to start legacy, and they're, later on in life. So this is something that's never too late to start.
Right. And just also, so when we film our series and we have the guest speakers, will alternate between the two. And so we'll have our series one week, and then we'll have a guest speaker the next week, and then it'll just alternate back and forth. So that's how it's going to work, just to give you guys an idea of how that's going to work. Yeah, and it'll be set up in a series format. So right now, the title of this is Legacy. Introduction to Legacy. Intro to Legacy. So we're going to have several weeks. Ultimately we'll have quarters. Every 3 months will be a new series, and we'll cover different things, and we'll be announcing that. And make sure to follow us on social media so you can know what we're talking about. And some things will interest you, some things may not interest you, and that's fine. Just keep us subscribed so you at least hear what's coming up, and who knows. You'll be in a different spot in life, even a few months down the road, that some of the stuff we're talking about may be helpful, and we'll always be able to go back and reference this and watch these or listen to these podcasts. Yeah. And so where you can follow us, just to get that out of the way and everything, but you can find us at Legacy Builders Podcast on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram. We're going to make a Gab account as well. We don't have one yet, but we're going to have a Gab account and a Rumble as well. And so you can find us on any of those platforms. Yep. So we just want to make sure that it's available. Ultimately we may start a website or something, but we also want to help direct things from you guys. So one of the other things that we'll have is an opportunity for you guys to, even now, you could be typing in a question as this is, being aired. You can type in some questions, some topics, some things that you want to hear about, and we'll cover them. I promise you that we don't know everything, but we have a lot of people and we have a lot of resources. If we don't know the answers, we'll bring a special guest on just for you to answer that question. And because I promise you, you're probably not the only one that has that question. Right. And you can email us those questions at any point in time, or message us on any of those platforms. Our email is also legacybuilderspodcast@gmail.com. And so at any point, the doors are open to ask any questions that you have. We're here for you. We're just sharing our journey and some of the success things. And we know that that we have something that could benefit your life. So yes. Well, we're going to start talking about why legacy. And so legacy is something where next episode we're going to define it, and we're going to talk all about what legacy is. But let's talk about the why. So why legacy? Yeah, again, great questions. And I see so many times families or individuals who start to build something, and they build it, and some people are even very successful in that thing that they build. And a lot of times the family gets neglected. The family gets left behind. They get left out of the dark. I see one generation raised up. They have kids, and they raise them up, give them to a point just to get them out of the house, and the kids are off to fend for themselves and try to figure out life. Well, and unfortunately too, some that has been the culture of what parenting is just to raise them up to get them out of the house. But like parenting doesn't end there. And that's something you've talked about all the time as well, is that because then there's nothing to build on anymore.
Right. And parenting is definitely one component of legacy. And and we'll have a whole session just on parenting. Again, not to say that we have it all figured out and together, but you're going to be surprised at some of the wisdom that we have grasped and the things that we do have right. And we'll have, you'll even hear the stuff that we did wrong. We're going to be an open book, and you can't learn, if we don't tell you even the wrongs.
And not we as much as, because I haven't been a parent before. I am just giving the child's perspective of that, which is something that's very special, because not very often do you hear what worked and what didn't from the parent, or not very often do you have a parent willing to hear that out. So thank you for being willing to hear that out and being willing in front of many people as well.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I mean, and not how many parents even allow their children to have discussions and to call them out and to even to share, some of the frustrations in, that, and that's what we'll talk about. That's where Madison will come in. When I say we, it's Madison, because she's going to tell from a child's perspective, from the kid's perspective, what they're really thinking, because parents think they know what the children are thinking, but they don't, especially when they get into the junior high school and high school years. And there's a lot of disconnect and a lot of things that parents miss out during those times. And Madison's going to tell you, this is what parents say, but this is really what the kids are thinking. And so we're gonna address type of stuff like that. But let me go back to the why legacy.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a prop here. I'm gonna start using, and we got some DVD cases that we're just gonna start. I'm going to show you. This is what happens. So somebody, parents start building something, and some parents don't build nothing. They just raise the kids. But some people, they just start building something, and they're building it. They're being successful. They're building, just continue to build. And then all of a sudden they have kids, and then the kids start building something. So they're over there building something, and we keep trying to build something, and now we have two somethings going on, right? And they just keep building, and we just go through life and keep building. But all I'm trying to say is this: what if, take those off, Madison, what if while I'm building something before I have children, and I have children, and I say, hey kids, look at what I'm building. I'm doing something. What would be great is if you guys, instead of starting all over, and every generation starts over with something else, consider helping me build this, and we can build it together. And instead of me building something that ends with my life, and you're going to start over and try to figure it out, go through some of the same struggles and build your own thing, why don't you help me build? And so now Madison builds, and we build together, and we work on this thing. And before you know it, what one person could do by themselves is now amplified, because we're building it together. And she's not starting over. She's coming in the middle of a thing. And we just keep building.
Well, then, and to add to that as well, then when he passes away, I still build.
And then
my kids still
build.
And it just continues. And that's legacy right there, is when it just continues. And yeah.
That's how you build legacy. And this is what we're going to talk about. And defining legacy is all up to you. Take these down now.
Yeah.
But that's the whole point of legacy builders, is why don't we build something together, then just leave it to raising kids up, go figure out life on your own, argue along the way. Hopefully you guys have somewhat of a relationship when they move out, and maybe you don't. But what if we built things together? What if we took time and we just said, look, I'm investing in not only your life, but I'm investing in this thing that we're going to build, and I want you to be a part of it, and we're going to do this thing together.
Yeah, so good.
So that's kind of the premise. That's what we're that's what we're going to focus on. I mean, people are either going to build things together or they're going to build something by themselves. Some people aren't going to build anything at all. They're just going to exist. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with that. We're not saying that that's bad. We're just giving you another option.
Yeah.
This isn't about one's good, one's bad. No, you got to figure out what that is for yourself, and just decide to do something. If you decide not to do anything, that's fine. No big deal. You're a good person. And this isn't about a good person or a bad person. This is about how do you connect? How do you build something that's going to last for generations to generations? That's what we're here to help. We believe that there's a lot of people who want to learn this stuff. We believe there's a lot of people because they ask us. We know there's a lot of people, and not many people are talking about it. Not many people are talking about it. So we're going to start talking about it.
Yeah, we are.
We're doing it.
Absolutely. And I remember when you did that movie example for the first time, we were actually sitting down talking about our family legacy, and he brought out that example. And I was just like, wow, this is really powerful, because when you do think about it, like, so many kids are just starting over and they never build anything past really the point. They might build a little bit bigger than their parents did, but it's, if we can build like that, it goes so much further, because there's just, I mean, then you don't have to learn it all over again. And that's something I appreciate, that he's allowed me to come with so many questions, because then I don't have to learn it all over again. And I think your hope is for me to even excel and be greater than you have even been in your lifetime, and to get farther than where you have been at this age. And so to really build something together, I just remember how powerful that example was. So
yeah, that's the exciting part is, I think most parents do want their kids to excel them and to be beyond them. And what a great opportunity to help, establish not just a financial baseline, but also just concepts, education, philosophies, just a life, just being able to explain some of the pitfalls of life and explain. I mean, I know
peer pressure, opposition, like so many different things. I mean, emotions, relationships.
Right.
There's so many different factors to life.
And those are all things that we have talked about along the way. And we're going to share those stories in these series on how we would just talk about that with the kids and say, hey, you're about to experience this in your life. I don't know when, but this is what's coming up. And, you're going to have to experience this. We all experience it. And without that support, and Madison will attest to this, because we've talked about it and we had that support, it helped her get through those where some people, it would crush them and it would cause them to go into depressions. It would cause them to go into life changes because they couldn't rely on their parents to help them out and to explain these things. It was all yes or no, because I'm the parent, I said so. This is why building legacy is so important, because the number one question that we as parents have to be able to answer, and I'm not going to go into it today, we'll probably do a whole series on this one question. If I'm the parent and I tell Madison, no, you can't do this, what's the number one question that every kid will ask?
Why?
Because if you respond as a parent, because I said so, you just lost credibility with your child. And we're going to help teach you how to answer that in a way that will help build legacy, not sit there and have arguments. I'm the parent, I said so. That doesn't help them at all. Doesn't help them at all.
I think as well, because every kid comes in the world, they don't know anything. Like, I mean, I still don't know a lot. And a lot of the times at my age, at 20, like 21, 22, we like to think that we know it all and that we've got it figured out. And really, we're just seeking answers from so many different areas. And so to be able to be on this podcast and learn from the people who even my dad learned from at my age is a very cool opportunity as well for me. And I hope people who are also in their 20s see this as a great opportunity to just learn from people who have already lived life, and are still living and still learning life. And yeah, and just the why question is really something that just needs to be answered, because we're all, I mean, we don't know the answers, and because I said so is not really an answer. It's an end of discussion thing. Whereas if you can cultivate that kid's curiosity, then they're going to come to you with more questions because you actually answered the question reasonably. And like, I mean, just to go into it a little bit, what is the answer? Like, what would you tell us when we asked why?
Yeah, so I have two responses, and this is why legacy isn't building legacy is important. So we go back to that thing that we're building, right? So I say, look, here's why, because we're building this together. And if you do that, whatever that is, that will impact what we're building together. And that's not what we agreed that we stand for. So when we sat down as a family and we defined who we are, now when I say, look, you can't do that. Well, why? Because we had a meeting about this. We agreed this is what we stand for. See this right here? We agreed that this is what we're going to build together moving forward. Before that point, we didn't have something that we were building together. We didn't have that identity. But I knew in the whole time that I'm building leaders. And I told them, I said, here's the reason why, is because I'm training you to be a leader. And I don't know the sphere of influence and the leadership that you will have, but this is not what leaders do. If you do this, this will impact you as a leader in whatever area that you're going to go on before. I just want you to consider that, whatever your purpose is. And we help our kids discover purpose. We talk to them about, hey, you got to figure out why you were put on this earth. What's your purpose? You weren't just put here to exist. And I feel so many people know that there's something more to life. There's something more to them being here than just going to a job and coming home. Not to say there's anything wrong with it. I just know there's something deeper inside that's pulling them to do something more with their life. Well, we help them discover that purpose. We help them discover who, the why. And so when they say, well, why can't I do that? Because I'm training you to be a leader, and that's not what leaders do. And you can choose to do that. It's your choice, but there are consequences to your choices. And so many parents don't teach that there are consequences to their choices. They try to eliminate those consequences and take that burden off of them instead of explaining the consequences.
Well, and that's so powerful because it leaves the choice in the kids' hands. And most of the time they're not going to choose that wrong thing after you explain like that. There might be situations where they do, but after you explain out and go through all of that, like, it leaves the choice in the kids' hands. And I mean, and you just explained why, because of the consequence. You explained what you like, the greatness that they can become over here. You reminded them that they're a leader, who they are, their identity that you're training them to be. And yeah, I mean, that's the power in that.
I mean, how did you respond? I mean, when we would tell you guys that, what was your thought process as a kid?
I mean, I don't think I'm going to be able to remember all of my thought processes from when I was 5, but
right.
I mean, what I just said pretty much is, it leaves the choice in your hands, and as a kid, you're like, man, well, I want to be a leader. Like, that sounds pretty good.
Right.
Like, why would I not want to be a leader? And so, yeah, it's just because I said so cuts the conversation off. And as we've been talking through like a lot more, there's actually a lot of cutting off the conversation, like things that there's more than just because I said so. There's a lot more things where you can cut off the conversation, that you may not even know that you're actually cutting off the conversation, but where you could instead use that to better the relationship and grow that relationship and cause them to ask more questions. Or
right.
Something
well,
like
and that's
that.
What I was just going to say is that's what ultimately ended up happening is I never kept getting the why question because they knew what the answer was going to be.
Yeah.
So instead they're like, well, how do we do this? what about this? So now we started now it created an atmosphere to come and ask questions about things. Well, hey, so and so at school is dealing with this. Well, how do we handle this? So now that they're not coming to you asking for because I said so answer. They're coming and proactively asking questions now, because now they know they're in leadership training. And it definitely has created a pretty dynamic environment. And Madison responded very well, and she, as does Riley. But we have lots of great conversations and lots of great questioning.
Well, and too, like with your kids, they all have different personalities as well. So they're not all going to respond the exact same way, which is okay. Like everybody has different personalities, different ways and tracks of growth. I noticed for Riley, he sometimes listening, actually just like listening to us have a conversation for him could be really impactful. Instead of maybe posing the first question or something. And that's just a difference in personality. There's nothing wrong with that. There's just different ways that people grow. And as a parent, you have to learn the ways your kids grow. And so, yeah.
And so that's what where our goal is here with Legacy Builders. It starts with our family. It starts with us deciding as parents, or even if you're not parents, if you're an individual, you don't plan on having kids, I mean, you can still leave legacy. You don't have to have children to leave legacy. And we'll get into that next episode. And we're gonna talk about a lot of that in the next episode. But that's where we're at. We want to share our story. We want to explain what legacy is all about. We're going to define that in the next episode. And we just wanted to make sure in our introductory episode of this podcast that we could help you to hear from us what is Legacy Builders, what's this all about, how's this going to work out. So hopefully,
and who we are, what our story is,
yep, exactly.
how this came to be. So
so I'm excited to work. I mean, this is awesome. I get to work with my daughter in communicating life lessons and building legacy. And that's the exciting part about the whole thing. And we're just going to be able to share our story together and hopefully learn some stuff. And anything you want to say before we conclude our?
No, next episode of our series, we'll be talking about what is legacy. We'll be defining it, and then we'll also be defining what it's not, and then going a little bit more into personal legacy, family legacy, all of that kind of stuff. So see you next time on Legacy Builders.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Legacy Builders podcast. Make sure to share this episode with your friends and family, and remember, today is a great day to start building your legacy.